everyone, and welcome to the Como Factor podcast. I'm Sonal Trivedi.
And I'm Christine Strobush. Change is hard. Transformative change can feel overwhelming and out of reach. When you use the Como Factor as your guide, you will discover that you can accomplish more than you ever thought possible.
Join us on this journey as we discuss real-life, personal, and professional transformation stories to inspire you to take action and achieve true transformation with sustainable results. For those of you that are new to our podcast, this week we're continuing where we left off in the mini-series that deals with Christine and my experience on going from being laid off to launching our own business. We're now in week 2 following our layoff. And at this point, we had clarity that we wanted to start our own business and even had gone so far as to delineate our vision. After laying it all out, it did, in all honesty, feel a bit overwhelming. Christine, so that our listeners can truly appreciate what that felt like, perhaps you could share a story of a time when you felt overwhelmed and what you did in that situation to really take ownership.
Okay, Sonal, you know I love to tell a good story. But before I share one, I would like to inject a little bit of humor into this conversation because it can feel a little bit heavy. So here is a riddle for you and our listeners. This belongs to you, but everyone else uses it. What is it? What do you think, Sonal?
Well, I'm an empath and highly sensitive. So is it a heart?
It's a very good guess. And I think that would be a good guess coming from you, Sonal. That's not technically the answer. The answer is your name. So your name belongs to you, but everyone else uses it. So in the same vein as your name, that rhymes, and I wasn't even trying to rhyme, your life belongs to you. If you don't own and write your own story, who will? Think about that for a moment. So, Sonal, did I ever tell you about the stray email that led me to my dream job in Paris, France?
Christine, I know bits and pieces of the story, but if you wouldn't mind indulging me, please.
Whenever I have the opportunity to indulge you, you know I will. So let me just let me just jump in. So I was 26 years old, working in Plano, Texas, and I was working at the same company now. It had been about 4 years. At that time, I was a team leader and had been so for about a year or so. And as I mentioned in our last episode, my CIO had told me to go grow my business. So I was doing a lot of internal marketing of the services that my team could offer. And part of that marketing included an internal website on our company intranet. And then one day I received an email. Has anybody received an email? I think all of us get lots of emails these days. But that email was really special because it wasn't just any email. It was an email from our headquarters in Paris, France. That thought alone got me so excited. You see, I had studied French in high school, and I always had this dream of living in Paris one day. It was from a guy named Jean-Yves, and he worked at our global headquarters and was looking for one of the local leaders in Plano. Only for whatever reason, he couldn't find that guy's contact information. But what he did find was my internal team website, which included my contact information. So in his email, he asked if I knew so-and-so because he was trying to get in touch with him. Now, at that point, there were 2 critical paths that I could take. I had to make a choice. And I call this, path 1 was the no ownership or low ownership path. And path 2 was the maximum ownership path. So the no or low ownership path, I didn't know this guy, Jean-Yves, but I did know the guy he was looking for. So I could have responded, and simply gave him the guy's contact, end of story, washed my hands, I'm done. But I was so excited, and I'm all about ownership. So I took it upon myself to make a personal introduction between Jean-Yves and the gentleman that he was looking for. And I responded to Jean-Yves' email completely in French. Now, to be honest, I did have to look up a few words. It had been a few years since high school, but I did it. And in that email in French, I explained how much I wanted to go to France one day, that I knew my French wasn't that good, but I was honored to write my very first email in French. And then that was how I offered to get him and this other guy connected. So that was the path I took. Sonal, what do you think happened after I took that maximum ownership path?
Well, knowing you, Christine, and having that mindset of ownership, did things start to flourish after that?
Yes, in a massive way. So after helping Jean-Yves with his connection, because of the way I responded, our dialogue continued. And as fate or destiny would have it, it turned out that the headquarters was launching a global business intelligence project. And I ended up getting an invitation to Paris a few weeks after that. Now, there was a lot more that happened during my very first trip to Paris. But let's just say that 3 months later, I packed my bags and I moved to Paris for a 2-year expat assignment. So, friends, when you take ownership for your life and you have a service mindset, amazing things will happen.
Indeed. And I couldn't agree with you more. And I also recall some fond memories of us being in Paris together while at work, but we'll save that for another episode.
Very fond memory, Sonal.
But from all our experience and mine as well, both professionally and personally, a common momentum killer that I've observed is an individual's their tendency to wait for someone else to act. Over the years, you and I have also seen that, right? Firsthand from some of our colleagues, friends, and dare I even say, family. They frequently wait for someone else to provide initiative, take charge, assume responsibility, and often even blame. And if you think about it, what they're really waiting for is for someone else to step in and take ownership. However, more often than not, help never comes. But if we were to step in and take ownership from the get-go, it can free us to drive results. Reflecting on situations that I've come across and environments that I've been in, the most productive people and those most likely to succeed were those who were proactive about rooting out and solving their problems.
Sonal, I totally agree with this. I think, the thing that I don't have patience for are those people that take the wait and see approach.
Exactly. And on the flip side of that, proactive individuals, as we know, are the ones that are comfortable acting with a high degree of autonomy, and they rarely rely on others to get the ball rolling. So, with all this talk of what ownership is and why ownership is so important, you may be thinking right about now, how do you actually go about asserting ownership? It's not like you can just say, hey, I take ownership of the situation and voila, your problems are solved.
Hey, I noticed that French there. That was good.
I dropped that in just for you, Christine.
Thanks.
So as I was saying, there's an actual process to taking ownership. And we think in the end, it's worth following if you want to achieve an optimal outcome. So let's talk a little bit more about the process that we applied to taking authentic ownership over our future. It all started with our vision. After we had laid out our vision and found clarity on what that looked like in terms of where we wanted to go, we then had to ask ourselves the question, where are we today?
And Sonal, that was a fairly easy exercise as we were truly starting with a completely blank slate. But the stress started to mount when we began discussing the bridge from where we were, our current reality, to where we wanted to go, our vision.
Indeed, Christine, it's not like we had a large team of people or unlimited resources to be able to delegate to as we did in our former corporate lives. Right. It's also important to note, especially if you're new to our podcast and joining us for the very first time today, Christine and I had determined that we wanted to go from layoff to launch within 25 days. Now, what that ultimately meant was that we wanted to start our own business with our very first consulting engagement within a month of us coming up with the concept of founding our own startup business. And guys, I got to be honest here. It felt like a lot. There were so many things to do to get this all started. We started by breaking down the vision into discrete containers of what we called projects. This essentially helped us to take a huge vision and turn it into manageable buckets, and also helped us a great deal with prioritization. For example, before we could just go out and get consulting and coaching engagements, we had some steps we needed to take in terms of laying the foundation for our business. So we created a project for setting up our business. It had underlying tasks such as creating our business name, designing our logo, deciding on what type of business structure we were going to create. For example, were we going to create an LLC or a corporation? There were countless questions that needed to be answered. And then there was another conversation and project created around financing our company. This was a very important discussion as we had to determine where the money to start the company would come from and whether or not we would need to seek funding. We also had to come up with a monetary amount we would need to invest in order to successfully launch our business and to also keep it going until we were able to generate significant revenue. Additionally, something that Christine and I deeply believe in, and is also a founding principle for the Como Group, is that we plan to grow our business debt-free. So we went into great detail as we started to plan out our projected expenses and profits. It was necessary to look at what kind of tools, technologies, and services would be needed in order to start our company. And in the end, we took all these ideas and created a business plan, which again helped us to think through and plan for all that it would take to successfully launch our company, the Como Group.
Did you know that according to the U.S. Small Business Association, small businesses account for about 44% of U.S. economic activity? Are you one of these small businesses? According to a recent U.S. Chamber of Commerce survey, 58% of small business owners say that they are worried about closing their business permanently due to the global pandemic. Companies, big and small, that survive and thrive in these unprecedented times are those who can effectively adapt and embrace change, meaning they need to transform.
Given the current climate, you may think it difficult or even impossible to achieve true transformation and sustainable results for your business. After all, business transformation is multifaceted and involves strategically changing your people, culture, processes, and technologies. When you are struggling to survive, the thought of implementing major change can feel overwhelming and out of reach.
At the Como Group, we are here to help and to serve you to grow your business through transformation. We are transformation practitioners who have over 40 years of combined experience in personal and professional transformation. With mindfulness and compassion, we show and we help leaders like you to transform themselves, their businesses, and their lives.
The time for true transformation is now. We have helped other small to mid-sized businesses to grow this year, and we would be delighted to help your business transform and grow too. Connect with us now at thecomofactor.com and schedule your free consultation. Having this business plan was key because this was really the how we were going to take ownership of putting our vision for our future in full motion. With such an aggressive timeline and having only the two of us, we ran into a few challenges, and so far we had too many projects and tasks due at the same time.
I wonder if anybody else has ever experienced that before, Sonal.
I'm sure they have. And needless to say, when you've got dozens of things to get done in a day or a week, It's easy to start stressing out about the next task while in the midst of the one you're doing, right?
Yeah, I agree. And so why don't we just take a pause here for a moment? I think there's a teaching moment that perhaps you could share with our listeners.
Absolutely. I would say that our advice to our listeners would be to try to avoid getting overwhelmed by the number of tasks and things to do. Instead, focus your energy on the tasks that you've prioritized and stay with them one at a time until they're complete. This is why it's so critical to do the planning and prioritization upfront. So, following that, within a week, we had laid out the foundation. We had set up the LLC, created our own website, which Christine and I had never built a website before, designed collateral, and even managed to get our first client. So, Christine, that is a very exciting story in of itself. Do you maybe want to share with our listeners how we managed to get our first engagement and what that experience was like for us?
Of course, I would love to share that. It's one of the exciting stories I love to talk about. But before I do, I'd like to stress that I wholeheartedly agree with what you shared about planning and prioritization. As promise partners, you and I set some incredibly aggressive goals for ourselves. These dates weren't coming from anybody else, we were setting it. But once our strategy and our roles were relatively clear, I think we executed well. And so, in less than 10 days after being laid off from our corporate jobs, we made a conscious decision to jump into the deep end of our business and start adding value to the world. What always stuck in the back of my mind is this quote from Zig Ziglar that says, "You can get everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want." So how could we have possibly secured new business in less than 10 days after being laid off, you might ask? We harnessed the power of our network and identified a small business that could benefit from our transformation expertise. And we offered our services pro bono for the initial engagement. Now, the Latin words pro bono literally mean for the public good. And we often think about pro bono, you think about that from the legal side, you'll hear about attorneys doing pro bono work. In this case, we did pro bono consulting engagement. And that whole for the public good rang true for us. It was good for the company and it was good for us. So we were able to provide value to the small business. We helped them to develop their 3-year strategic plan, to clarify and finalize their company values, and we helped them to prioritize their 50 plus ideas in the pipeline. It was amazing when we started inventorying all of these ideas. There's no shortage of ideas, in fact. The fact is, the owners of the company had been so busy working in the business that they did not have or they did not make enough time to work on the business. So, as that initial engagement concluded, those owners realized that they didn't have the resources to execute all of these ideas in their pipeline, let alone even say the top 3 or the top 5 ideas.
What happened next?
Well, as you can imagine, I mean, when we did this pro bono engagement, we managed it like we would any other paying customer, and we delivered high quality deliverables in a short period of time. And so they were very happy with the work that we had provided them. So they asked us to help them to develop the strategy and plans for their top priority initiatives, and they asked us to manage the entire implementation. And of course, we said yes. Sonal and I smile and we say yes to a lot of opportunities these days. And then we leveraged our network to pull in the right skills and the right talents to be able to support the small business. And that included the creation of an information technology center of excellence in India. Please don't get me wrong. All of this is not a walk in the park. The work is challenging, but the people are phenomenal. But the fact is that we are literally building the plane and flying it at the same time. So at the Como Group, we still have so much to accomplish before declaring this business transformation with this small company a success. But what I can tell you is that small business experienced their best month in history in August, in the middle of the global pandemic. So when you take ownership and you serve your customers well, there's no limit to what you can accomplish. A number of our friends have asked us about how we were able to launch our podcast so quickly. I'll tell you, this whole experience has been new and exciting to say the least. Above and beyond having an amazing team, we use this incredible tool called Anchor. Sonal, why don't you share a little more about Anchor with our listeners?
Well, to record our podcast, The Como Factor, you guys, if you haven't already heard about Anchor, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me tell you, first of all, it's absolutely free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor even distributes your podcast for you, so it can be heard on platforms like Spotify, Apple, and much more. You can also make a few extra bucks from your podcast with no minimum listenership, and it's everything you need to make a podcast in one easy-to-access place. But with all that Christine and I have shared thus far, it wouldn't be fair if we didn't also address the sometimes harsh and brutal realities of starting a business. We may have made it seem like it was easy, but it really does require perseverance and grit. The biggest piece of having a successful outcome in any situation is taking ownership. For us, as we started on our entrepreneurial journey, we hit at least one roadblock each and every single day. But the reason we were able to get to where we are today boils down to our ability to see the roadblocks for what they are and acknowledging that it wasn't going to be a walk in the park and to keep going and move forward. And I think Nelson Mandela said it perfectly when he said, "It always seems impossible until it's done." So to us, no matter where you are right now, whether you're feeling overwhelmed with your specific situation, taking ownership is the perfect way to hit that refresh button and begin the transition to achieving results. This is true whether that involves just doing a simple task or taking on something bigger than yourself, such as launching your own business. There's a saying by Brené Brown that summarizes this perfectly. And I think it goes something like, you either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. And in our case, we had created our vision for the Como Group, which was the story that we wanted. The only way that story would come true was if we took ownership and no one else was going to do it for us.
Amen, sister. So, at the end of the day, each of us is responsible for our journey and our decisions. While we cannot control everything that happens to us, we can and we must take ownership for how we respond to the things that happen to us. Stress, anxiety, and depression in the world right now is at an all-time high. Whether you've lost your job, a loved one, or both, you may be challenged with maintaining a positive, meaningful mindset. So there's this man named Will who published a poetry collection called Lost in Life's Ocean. And within that is a poem called Broken Wing. And his words in this poem talk about a person feeling like a bird with a broken wing. And that really, really touched me. We are here to help you, our listeners. No matter what you're going through, it is so important to have a meaningful mindset, not one that is deficit-based or meaningless. On our next episode, we'll talk about how to go from feeling meaningless to having a meaningful mindset. Until next time, for more tips and tools, as well as to see all of the episode highlights from this podcast, please visit us at thecomofactor.com.